Because at the end of the day, America is going to want a president who is a decent human being, who doesn't shit on other people, who has some interest in the American people, some interest in something beyond himself. I think at the end of the day, people are going to reject this bigoted, divisive figure.
I'm just giving you the answer to the question you're asking all night long. Why do they vote for Donald Trump? It's not always because they like him. No, it's because stuff like that is kookier to them.
Bill Maher just went after Schiff hard, calling him out in a brutal way for his never-ending fight against Donald Trump. The roast was so intense, I wouldn't be surprised if Schiff never shows up on Maher's show again. If you enjoy bold and fiery moments like this, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of it.
I think it's true justice. The only thing he cares about is himself and money, and going after the money is a way to bring about some real justice.
Schiff started the evening with his usual strong attacks on Donald Trump, calling him a selfish narcissist who, in Schiff's words, only cares about himself and nothing else. He didn't hold back, saying Trump was clearly guilty of all the charges against him and claiming he was completely unfit to lead the country. With his usual dramatic style, Schiff described Trump as a serious threat to democracy and warned that if he came back to power, it would be a disaster for America. It was classic Schiff, full of bold claims, short on solid proof, and packed with political drama, but the most shocking part was still ahead, as he made a statement that's likely to come back and haunt him.
I don't share your pessimism about this or your pessimism about the general election. The reason why Joe Biden is going to beat Donald Trump is because at the end of the day, America is going to want a president who is a decent human being, who doesn't shit on other people, who has some interest in the American people, some interest in something beyond himself. I think at the end of the day, people are going to reject this bigoted, divisive figure.
Schiff kept going with his rant against Donald Trump, throwing out every insult he could in a clear attempt to tear him down, but the part that's probably making him cringe the most now is when he boldly claimed that Joe Biden would easily win the election. Fast forward to today, and that prediction has completely blown up in his face because Donald Trump is now the president, making Schiff's confident words look foolish and leaving him scrambling to explain himself. It's a perfect example of political karma in action, and watching it happen has been nothing short of entertaining, especially as Schiff's endless rant began to test the patience of both Bill Maher and Stephen Smith. Maher stayed calm, just barely, but Stephen couldn't help finally letting loose.
I'm just getting tired of seeing so much stuff targeted in his direction, but somehow, some way he still survives. I mean, we're talking about a situation where he's still going to be the GOP nominee. He's still going to be running for president. You're President Biden. That's the individual that you're going to have to beat. 4 indictments, 91 counts. They ain't even bringing up the bankruptcies, ain't even bringing up this particular issue with this civil case. And somehow, some way, he puts cats to shame because he clearly has more than 9 lives. I mean, come on.
Before Bill Maher even got a chance to speak, Stephen Smith jumped in with no filter, going straight after Schiff and his political allies for their non-stop efforts to take down Donald Trump. He called out their media attacks, endless investigations, digging up old controversies, and dramatic comparisons to some of history's worst figures, with Trump being labeled everything from Hitler to a threat to democracy and blamed for nearly everything. Yet despite it all, Trump hasn't just survived, he's thrived, defying every prediction and returning each time louder, stronger, and more determined than ever, becoming the one political figure Democrats and their media supporters just can't figure out, and the more they try, the more it seems to drive them crazy. Love him or hate him, Trump is the mystery they can't solve, and it's wearing them down. And that's when Maher, clearly fed up with all the anti-Trump noise, finally steps in and unleashes pure chaos.
The Atlantic put out an article last year, and it was called "Separating Sports by Doesn't Make Sense." Right. And talked about how we separate sports like the WNBA just because it's just socialization. This is insane.
I agree.
Okay. That's why people vote for Trump. Mm-hmm. Because there's stuff like that on the left that people just go, I know Trump's horrible, but separating by sports by makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. And if you think it doesn't, you can't leave the country.
Maher didn't waste a moment getting straight to the point, telling Adam Schiff exactly why people keep voting for Donald Trump. No sugarcoating, no spin. He slammed the Democrats for pushing empty policies, holding onto outdated beliefs, and losing touch with the real concerns of everyday Americans, which only adds fuel to Trump's growing support. One clear example he gave was the Democrats' push to blur biological lines in sports by insisting men and women should compete together, which for many Americans wasn't just confusing, it felt like an insult to common sense, but instead of listening to the backlash, Democrats ignored it, labeled criticism as hate, and kept moving forward, and Maher pointed out that this kind of extreme ideology doesn't bring people together, it pushes them away, and by doing that, they hand Trump a huge advantage. Because when voters have to choose between confusing ideals and someone who at least seems to live in the real world, they'll go with reality every single time.
I take the opposite view. I don't think he should have given the pardons at all.
Really?
No, I don't think he should have, and I was vocal about that at the time.
Can you refuse a pardon?
That's less clear because in the case of the January 6th committee, he pardoned essentially the whole committee.
Wait, did Senator Adam Schiff just throw President Biden under the bus? Because it definitely sounded like it. Schiff, who played a big role in the January 6th committee, was quietly given a pardon along with others from the panel that spent months pointing fingers and declaring guilt over the Capitol riot. But here's the twist, if everything that committee did was solid and justified, then why did Biden feel the need to hand out preemptive pardons in the first place? Now Schiff is out here acting like the pardon wasn't even necessary, carefully hinting that Biden might have jumped the gun, without directly saying it, of course. Still, the message is clear. In trying to protect himself from political fallout, Schiff ends up throwing shade at the very person who gave him cover. It's classic Washington double talk, take the protection when it's helpful, then pretend it never happened when things get messy. Schiff may think he's being slick, but the cracks in his story are showing, and you can bet the Biden team isn't loving how this looks. Bill Maher doesn't let it slide either. He calls Schiff out and takes a swing at the mainstream media too, blasting them for once again choosing sides instead of reporting the actual truth.
So the FBI came in and arrested the judge. Now, I haven't heard that, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I've ever read arrested a judge. So is this significant?
Well, I think
I'm not going to comment on something I don't know more about than what you've just told me.
You read about it too.
Yeah, I mean, I read about it, but I don't know.
So you don't trust anything either, and you work for the New York Times.
Well,
even Bret Stephens, a columnist at the New York Times, can't fully trust his own paper's reporting, and that says a lot. When someone from inside the newsroom starts doubting the headlines written by their own colleagues, you know the problem runs deep. That's exactly why Trump and millions of Americans have lost faith in legacy media and started looking elsewhere for the truth. It's a hard truth, but one that's become more obvious. Most major news outlets in America seem to have been taken over, especially by left-leaning agendas. Once respected institutions that were supposed to challenge power and reveal facts now look more like they're just following political scripts. Journalism, which used to be a cornerstone of democracy, often feels like a platform for biased narratives instead of honest reporting. And every time another big name in media stumbles, it only confirms what many people already felt. If you really want the truth, you won't find it in the echo chambers of the establishment. You have to look beyond them.
Catholic schools are popular now, even with people who aren't Catholic, because it's the last place you can send your kid to get an old school education. And they just tell the kids, forget about the Jesus stuff. Just, to them, that's okay indoctrination, as opposed to some of the other indoctrination that goes on. And also, the Catholics don't put up with bullshit. They take your phone, you have to learn your P's and Q's and your grammar and all this kind of stuff. And that's what I just don't understand, that parents don't have the whip hand anymore. Not that you should actually.
We all remember when things really started to fall apart, when the Democrats fully embraced woke ideology and tossed aside morality and basic common sense, and that's when the cultural fabric began to tear. Suddenly, kids were treated like they knew everything, while parents, especially dads, were portrayed as outdated jokes. Just watch any family sitcom from the last 10 years and you'll see the pattern: the clueless father, the somewhat capable mother, and the super smart, sarcastic kid who always has the last word. What started as light humor slowly turned into a clear message. Entertainment became a tool for pushing ideas, not telling stories. The result? A generation taught that rules don't matter, respect is old-fashioned, and consequences can be avoided. Discipline became a bad word, boundaries disappeared, and the family structure, once the core of society, was pushed aside to make room for virtue signaling and performative progress. Now we're seeing the effects, and it hit the Democrats hard. The loss of the 2024 election wasn't a fluke, it was the result of years of ignoring the values many Americans still care about, and even one of their own admitted it before it all came crashing down.
I respect the fact that you don't share my pessimism. I truly do. I understand where you're coming from. But I think that's part of the problem. I think the Democratic Party should share my pessimism. I think they should be on high alert. I think they need to treat him with the seriousness that it deserves, because you having a lot of faith in the American people. The man did get over 74 million votes. You've got people that are looking at Joe Biden. I'm not going to call him a cognitive mess or anything like that. That's very disrespectful. I would never speak about our president that way. But when you're 82 years of age, it's not offensive to say you're no longer a spring chicken and you don't seem to have.
Schiff and his allies spent years trying to convince the American people that Joe Biden was mentally sharp enough to lead, even though both sides of the aisle saw signs he was slipping. They stuck to their story, dodged questions, denied what was right in front of us, and told everyone not to worry, but we should've. By the time reality broke through all the political spin, it was too late. Biden wasn't the leader the moment needed, and the party knew it. That's when they scrambled and tried to boost Kamala Harris as their backup plan, hoping to regain trust, but it backfired badly. Her approval ratings dropped fast, her public appearances became jokes, and instead of saving the moment, she made things worse. The Democrats, once seen as strategic, suddenly looked completely lost. From pushing extreme ideologies and ignoring common sense to standing behind a clearly struggling president and doubling down with Kamala, they ended up turning away the very voters they needed. Bill Maher and Stephen A. Smith voiced what millions are feeling. People are done with being lied to, tired of fake performances, and over the constant blame games. Trump's continued support isn't just about him, it's about Americans rejecting the nonsense. The left tried to control the narrative, but truth always finds a way, and now even their own are starting to question everything they once defended. If you felt this message, hit the like button, subscribe, and stay tuned for more straight talk. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one.